Day 255 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another quick update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine today. And as always, I like to start off with those Russian military losses, so as of the 5th of November, so in the last 24-hour reporting period, there's been an additional 600 Russian military personnel losses. So currently sitting at approximately 75,440. Now, when we look at the Russian hardware losses, we have the armored combat vehicles, a whopping 21 losses there, tanks 8, artillery 4, and 2 choppers. True story, and I'll get into that shortly. But what we'll do firstly is jump back to the map here, and today again start on the outside of the Ukraine territory in all the way over in North Korea. So where North Korea has started sending trains to Russia, for which the countries share a tiny eastern border there on the very, very far east. And this is said to be the first time in several years that North Korea has sent any trains across the border to Russia. Now, the timing is impeccable as Russia is also running low on ammunition. So North Korea is likely supplying the Russian Federation with shells and ammunition for the war in Ukraine. And I've also got to say here, so you know you're on the wrong side of history when your military partner is that of North Korea. Then we'll move across into the Donbas region today, where just more generally, the Ukrainian military repelled 14 Russian advances in the Donbas over the past 24 hours. And a key strategic fighting point here has been, of course, Svatove. So there's been quite a few unsuccessful counterattacks from the Russian side just west of Svatove in the last 2 or 3 days or so. And then interestingly, if we move a little bit further down onto the map here, we have the settlement of, this is Berestove, which is hiding right there, where Russian sources themselves claim that they have lost Berestove to the Ukrainian forces. And I expect we should see a map update on that in the next day or two, perhaps. Then we'll move a bit further down to the central Donbas region, never a quiet day for Bakhmut. And what's clearly happening here at the moment on the Russian side is they're attempting a push from the southern end, northwardly direction, of course, there. So Optine is almost, or basically, their staging ground. Obviously, they haven't taken that yet there, but we'll see what happens. It's very, very slow progression, a lot of give and take in this region for both sides. Technically a stalemate when you zoom out over the months. And also in the Donbas, so explosions were reported in Pokrovsk in the Donetsk Oblast here. So I really need to zoom out for this one. Here we go. So there it is, really quite close to the Oblast border, in fact, which is somewhat of a rare location for the Russian forces to fire at. But if we would zoom in, and you can already see it there zoomed out, there is an important railway crosspoint. If the Russian side were ever to be able to extend this far, they'd obviously love to use that railway line to support their troops. Then we'll move a bit further across on the map there today. So the Russian army shelled the town of Mykolaiv. So right here, really, really northeast of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. And they did so with an S-300 surface-to-air missile system. So again, these S-300 SAMs were originally designed for air defense targets, so shooting in the sky at maybe a plane or a missile, those sorts of things. But in the later years, the S-300s were modified to hit land targets, but they were never ever particularly very good at it. Then we'll move across to the adjacent frontline oblast of Kherson. So yesterday, local residents in Snierivka, so right here at the front line, reported that the Russian forces blew up a pedestrian bridge. And we've got some footage of that today as well. So this is yet another example of your typical Russian pullback strategy, which never looks good for an advancing force. Of course, it is coming into the muddy season, so both sides would start to have some difficulty in advancing. That's what we call Rasputitsa. And at the start of the war, Russia learnt some hard lessons about advancing with all that mud. Then we'll zoom in a little bit further down. So there was a big fire reported near Chornobaivka, really northwest of Kherson city itself. Now, Chornobaivka was originally a well-known Russian base and airfield location. So two things there, really. But Russia has finally since abandoned the airfield here just last week because it just became untenable to support it in light of a lot of Ukrainian fire control or artillery just being able to reach it all the time. And speaking of Ukrainian strikes, there was also a Ukrainian strike, a missile strike at a Russian military base near Radensk. So Radensk is here quite far away from the front line. In fact, if I just pull up the ruler, I'll have to be able to see where it is. And there it is. So let's see what we're talking about. Maybe let's say the closest point. So 52 kilometers, thereabouts 30 miles. So basically, the Ukrainian forces took out a Russian base here, and this is probably the third or fourth time at least that the Ukrainian forces have struck it. It's perhaps not too surprising that Russia tends to use this area because of, well, considering the fact that it's a main passageway. You got a main highway there for the Russian forces to get to the front line with. And as we all know now, Russia loves their main roads. Oh, and also, in another sign that the Russian forces are at least somewhat withdrawing from the north bank of the Dnieper River, so the Russian occupying forces have been looting the Olensky Kherson Art Museum in the nearby the city there, Kherson City. So they've been doing this over the past few days, as confirmed by the museum's administration, which it advised via a Facebook post. And the Facebook post said that the Russian occupying forces, quote, carried out everything they saw, everything they could reach. This of which is super illegal. Obviously, not just in peacetime, which it is. So basically, when an invading force loots a museum, it's very much considered a war crime, as they're stealing so much cultural history. And it's a bit of a dick move, to be honest, as well. I would also, really nearby to that, the Ukrainian forces continued to destroy Russian pontoons and boat crossings over the Dnieper River. So they did this with the HIMARS, high precision guided missiles as well. And Ukrainian forces do not let up with that, which obviously makes it pretty difficult for the Russian forces to traverse north and south of the river there to supply and all sorts of things there. Oh, and in some other interesting tidbits here, would you believe it? Not one, but two more Russian Ka-52 Alligator helicopters were shot down in the past 24 hours. Now, I've not yet been able to confirm the precise location. That will come soon, but very likely somewhere in the north bank of the Dnieper River here. As per usual, for instance, Berislav is sometimes the case there. You see, maybe a bit of a backstory here. So chopper pilots will not risk high altitudes in this region due to the abundance of air defense systems all around, on both sides in fact. So the choppers, they come in and they fly low instead because it's more of a case that they're unlikely to get hit. But of course then they become susceptible to the shoulder-mounted man-pads such as the Stingers or the Strelas. And yeah, Ukraine does have a lot of these, so the Russian forces are very much putting themselves at risk. But to me, it's really like the Russian forces have a short-term memory in this region because so many Ka-52 Alligator choppers have gone down in this region, even in just the past, say, 30 days, for instance. Then we'll move across to Mykolaiv, where air defenses are active and working, as Russia was firing 2 cruise missiles from the Black Sea Fleet. So Ukraine was able to shoot down one over the Mykolaiv Oblast and another one very close in the Kherson Oblast there as well. And I'm sure this is quite upsetting for Russia as Ukraine is getting more and more air defense systems in this region now. Then we'll move across to some news for the day. So the US announced an additional $400 million military aid package for Ukraine, which includes 250 refurbished Hawk air defense system missiles, 45 refurbished T-72B tanks, and I believe from what they said, an additional 45 non-refurbished ones, additional ones coming from either Czech Republic or Netherlands. Also in the package is 1,100 Phoenix Ghost drones, so that's pretty cool. 40 armored riverine boats, and a refurbishing of 250 M1117 armored combat vehicles. And all in all, deliveries of many of these goods will start to come through at the beginning of December, so within the next 30 days or less. And then in some other news, Germany Chancellor Scholz has traveled to China to meet with President Xi, where they both discussed and came to the agreement that the usage of nuclear weapons by Russia is just purely and simply a red line that should not be crossed within this war. So it's good to see the Chinese president, who is usually being a bit more cozy or buddy-buddy with Russia and Putin himself, speaking in this type of anti-nuclear language for sure. And then in some other news, Vladimir Putin of Russia signed a new law allowing the mobilization of criminal offenders basically into the front lines of the war. And see, things like this is exactly why you should judge Russia by their actions instead of their words or political rhetoric. And if I were just to give you the quick and recent lowdown, so first Russia said it was doing a military mobilization in September, and it said it was to mobilize only 300,000 soldiers, but even the mobilization legal decrees put no limit on the mobilization, or rather blocked out Decree Part 7 saying the amount, so it's probably a lot more into the future. But then they said the mobilization was now officially finished as of earlier this week. Then about a day later, they started their regular biannual conscription drive for another 120,000 troops, days after their military mobilization officially ended. Then they signed this law into action today, where they mobilize convicts at an institutional level now. So this also includes convicts that are now ready for parole, so they don't get that freedom that they were expected to get. They will instead now go to the front lines as well. And then with all of this, I'm sure in the very next couple of months, they'll start yet another official military mobilization drive again. And I should say, all at the same time, Russia continues something called covert mobilization or shadow mobilization. So mobilizing new troops that come from poorer eastern Russian rural locations there. So these citizens in those locations get these, or are promised of these sweet financial contracts to go to war. But the kicker is there is no pay received by these newly contracted soldiers. Not paid a dime. But really, this is all on the backdrop of, I guess I could say, long story short, Putin wants and needs to mobilize as many troops as he can to make up for a lack of a lot of things he's actually got on the frontline battlefields itself. A lack of technology, a lack of weapons, and something he probably doesn't realize, a lack of morale amongst all of the soldiers there. It's actually a very, very old Russian playbook, so countless soldiers, countless artillery shells. But this type of implementation is just becoming more and more ineffective in the modern warfare age. And then in a mobilization blunder for the day, so I got this video here of mobics that arrived at their location in Crimea, only to be left to sleep outside without any tents or food. The commanders left, leaving the mobics to their own devices, effectively. So these newly mobilized troops were told to go to this staging ground in this Crimean location, where it was announced for them that 70% of the tanks were already set up. So they get to the location, there was nothing there, no tents, no commanders, no food. Roughly 500 to 700 mobilized there, which is roughly about a battalion in size. And they said they had to sleep outside, as you can see on the subtitles. They found some wood pallets so that they wouldn't have to sleep on the cold, hard ground. And stories like this are just all too common now. Like, there really is no shortage of these types of stories. It's amazing. It's really quite perplexing. And then just a bit of a quick funny to round it all off with today, guys. So a couple of days ago, Vladimir Putin made calls to modernize Russia's military equipment. Now, this is funny for a couple of reasons, at least. So first of all, I think he should have done this before he began a war. And, a special military operation, SMO. And secondly, with what he says here, the way that he says it, because he says weapons must be continuously improved and remain effective. Now, when he says remain effective, is he talking about the unmaintained 1960 tanks that soldiers are using, or the old BMP infantry vehicles, or the 19th century Mosin rifles that a lot of troops received that have been known to be in terrible condition, obviously, and in some instances even explode in Russian soldiers' hands? Perhaps he's talking about the worn out tubes and barrels for the Russian artillery systems, making them completely inaccurate. I mean, the list goes on. I'll stop it there just for now. But in the end, this is just one great political puff piece. So part and parcel of the Russian strategy, really, to look tough, but really be what they call a paper tiger. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, ignore all the trolls in the comments, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.